Hey guys, Chris Avila's here from Tech Up Teacher with this video to help you set up the student tracker system that I wrote about in the EdSurge article. If you have not read the EdSurge article, make sure you check out the link in my blog post. That will probably make this make a little bit more sense. But when you go to the EdSurge article or you check out my blog post, you will see a link to this folder where you can make your very own copy of my student tracking system that I used for a few years. And I really love the student tracking system because it allows me to take data on my students and use it for better learning outcomes, right? We track a lot of data, or we want to do better for our students, but there's always a disconnect, I think, in student data and using that data for better learning outcomes. So I wanted to create a system that would hopefully remedy that, and this is what I came up with. So this whole system starts with a good rubric, and I've included one in here for you. And what this is a rubric that I created to assess my students' essays over the course of an entire year. If you're going to make your own rubric, this student tracking system becomes really powerful the longer you use the rubric. So for instance, I use the same rubric to assess my kids' essays all year long. If you're in elementary school, using this to assess year-long behavior. If you're a science teacher, using this to assess year-long labs. The longer you use the same rubric in this system, the more powerful the system is. And so we'll jump over to the View Live form. And we're going to do a quick entry. So I'll be reviewer A. We are going to do an entry on Johnny Author. So one of the things, I'll give you a quick tip. A lot of times I use drop-down menus and I put my kid's name, and sometimes I'll have 150 kids in a drop-down menu. If you click on the drop-down menu and you start to type in somebody's name, it actually automatically pops up. So even though I would have 150 kids in a drop-down menu, it wasn't that bad because I would just type in their last name and they would pop up and I would select them. My students would enter their email address because they were high school kids and they had an email that we used in school. But I'll just go ahead and fill out this rubric. And again, this is how I used a rubric to assess my students, and they used the rubric to self-assess throughout the entire year. And so I'm just entering random data in for Johnny Author. This could have been done by his peer partner who had graded his essay. This could be done by himself. This could be done by me, the teacher. Everybody used the rubric. And because we had the drop-down menus with students' names, we know that it was going to be labeled properly for every student by their name. Speed that up a little bit. This is the second part of my essay rubric. It is kind of holistic, while the first part was more about the making sure all the features of a good argumentative paper were in there. This is the more holistic part, so they'll fill that out. He did great. He got 100. Truth. Great job, dude. Dude, awesome. So, right? The point of this is not so much the rubric. The point of this is when we go back into the folder and we check out the sample blog rubric database. So what's beautiful about this is what we just did has been logged, and we can see that we have all of that data from that blog, from that Google form now in this Google Sheet. So what we have here is a database of information about all of our kids in all of our classes that we've, used that rubric to collect that information. We've used that Google form to collect that information. You can see that we have a bunch of entries on Johnny Author. We have author A, B, C, D, and you can look now, because this has been set up by a heat map, how students are doing as a class. So we can see if they're doing well on my rubric, it's been highlighted in green. If they've been doing so-so, it's highlighted in an orange. And if they've been not doing so well, it's highlighted in a red. And the way that's done is just conditional formatting. You can see I add a rule, and right now it says, if these cells contain a 2, it's green because 2 is the highest score they can get. If they got a 1, it's like an orange. If they have a 0, it's a red. And that's all just done through conditional formatting in case you want to play with that. And that's just a right click and come down to conditional formatting, and then you would just add the rules that you want to. But as a whole class, I could scroll and see where all of my kids are doing well, where some of my kids might be struggling and who needs some direct instruction. And so I really like this, especially if you jump back in to the blog Rubric, and eventually when you have more responses, if you go to summary of responses, it will actually turn all of that data into a bunch of charts for you, which is even better. So the database is valuable to me as a teacher because, again, it's all of the information about how my kids are doing on their essays over the course of a year. But what if I wanted to drill down into an individual student, right? This is where the student tracker really shines. If we jump back into the EdSurge folder, you'll see that I have a sheet called Student Tracker. What this Student Tracker sheet does, with the help of a formula, is pull all information specific to a kid onto its own sheet. And you can see in cell A1, that's the formula that I've written, and I'm going to share with you. I'm going to show you how to set this up. But what's great about this is on my big class database, I might end the year, I think I ended the year one year with 1,000 entries. So I had 1,000 pieces of information on all of my kids over the course of a year, so I could get a whole class picture about how I was doing as a teacher and how my students were doing it. But what I had my high school kids do is I had them make a copy of the student tracker. I had them change the formula so that they now had their own copy that pulled out only their information. So this is Johnny Author's sheet. It's only shared with me, and Johnny Author and I could drill down and look exactly into seeing how he's doing. And again, we can make charts out of this. It has the same heat map properties that the large database has. But what's fantastic about this is something that Johnny Author and I could sit down and have a discussion about when we have our student-led conference. If you're in elementary school, it might be a little bit harder because, in my experience, I've had to set up the sheets for the kids. But what's great is once you make the sheet, not only could you share it with the kid if you wanted to, you could share it with the parent. And if you want to get really clever, you can even use something like Formule that when a new entry is added to the sheet, it's automatically emailed to the parents. So I've created a workflow where a teacher, let's say in elementary school, I'm doing behavior. I use my Google form rubric to assess a kid's behavior. I hit the submit form. That goes to the database on my whole class and their behavior. But then using the student tracker formula, it also is going to pull specifically one kid's data. So Johnny Author now has a whole sheet about behavior, and that sheet can be shared securely with parents. That sheet can use Formule to automatically email parents a custom email to let them know this is how Johnny Author did in school today. So you're really only kind of limited by your creativity with this kind of student tracker system. Again, we have whole class data, and now we have individual student data that we can use to make learning outcomes better for kids in high school through one-on-one conferences. In elementary school, we could share that immediately with parents automatically, so they're getting an update email every day. Because I think maybe at the elementary school level, you can do one entry per kid per day, or maybe one entry per kid per week. So you have something something to talk about at parent-teacher conferences. You have a sheet, that has some of this data, that has areas, whether it's behavior, whether it's writing, whether it's reading stamina. You have this data that you can sit down and have a discussion with parents. And what I love about this is a lot of this would drive, my discussions with my kids. I might come over and I might see, format 1-inch margins. Johnny 4 out of 6 times has had incorrect formatting on his margins. So I might sit down with him and say, hey man, you seem to be really struggling here. What's going on? Let's make sure you understand that. Or conversely, if we find somewhere where he's really strong, let's say he has a bunch of greens, in sentence fluency, I might make him the class expert and he can go around and help kids. Or what I've done before is, let's say a kid has done, really well in his introductions. He has all greens in his introductions. I might not grade that kid's introductions anymore because clearly he doesn't need that. So I, as a teacher, can focus in on different areas where kids need help or are doing well, and I can use that to my advantage to help them become even better. And so what we're going to do, I'll give you an example of how we can set this up. So I'm going to jump back into the EdSurge folder, and I am going to create a new spreadsheet. And this could be a kid doing this. This could be you, the teacher, doing this. And I'm going to call this, once we load up, I'm going to call this Johnny author's essay sheet, something like that. Okay, so we have a nice blank spreadsheet, and the goal now is to pull Johnny author's data out of the whole class database. So in the EdSurge article, in the folder, you'll see the student tracker formula, which gives you the formula that you need to put into cell A1. And it's equal query import range. You have to get the sheet key, and then the sheet name, and then the range that you want it to scan, right? So you're going to have to change this. The rest of this stuff, oh, I shouldn't say that. Select where column 3 equals student name. So you're going to have to type in the student name as well. And if you use my sample kind of format blog here, you'll see that student name, column C, is number 3. If you move this somewhere else, you're going to have to make a column 4, column 5, column 1. So you're going to have to adjust the formula if you change the database. So we have Johnny author, and I have my student tracker formula. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get the sheet key. And if you're not familiar with how to get a sheet key, because I'm taking my information from where my Google form is saving all this data, I need to get the sheet key by going to share. And the sheet key is everything that comes after this D. So you can pull it off of here if you want, or right up here in the URL, you can pull that out too. So we can see this is, 1U8 LCL. You can see the whole thing. So what we're going to do is we are going to, let's paste our formula. So we're going to paste our formula. We'll just use this tracker. So we will put this into the sheet key. There you go. And now we need the sheet name. What the sheet name is referring to is down here, right? So in the rubric sample, there we go, I call it database. So I'm going to need to change this to database. So sheet name is database, exclamation point, stays. And now we have to do the range. So the range is going to be how far this sheet spans. I wanted to scan column A all the way through column AN. So it's going to scan that whole database, and it's going to pull out anything having to do with Johnny author. So it's going to be ranges A to AN, and we're going to select the column where the student name is Johnny author. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take this and we're going to paste it into our Johnny author essay. So let's copy and paste the formula. And let's go to the Johnny author sheet. We're going to put it into A1. And you'll see it goes into that spreadsheet. Now it's not color coded, it's not heat mapped, because I didn't make a copy of the student tracker, right? So if you right click, you make a copy of the student tracker, and let's say I'm going to change the formula. Let's look for, if we go back to our sample, let's say I want to get author A. So I'm going to pull out author A's information on the copy that I made. So I'm going to leave this. I'm going to change the column, author A. It's going to update, and now you see it's pulled out all of author A's information, and you can see author A is a rock star. So that's kind of how the formula works. That's where the formula goes. Sometimes this gets a little finicky. For the first time, when you paste the student tracker code, when you paste this formula into a sheet, if it's your first time, sometimes you have to come up here and hit the share button, and then just kind of hit done, and then it will load. I noticed that happen to me sometimes. So if that happens to you, if you paste in that formula, off of a new database with a new sheet with a new sheet key, and it's not working, go up to share, and then kind of just hit done, and that seems to make it work for some reason. But 9 times out of 10, it just works. So if I go over here, so again, let's say that you were ready to make another copy. I'm going to go to make a copy. because I'm copying the one that has the heat map already made. I'm going to open it up and rename it. Let's call this, I'm going to call this, let's do author B, and we're going to get author B in this one. This could be, you know, Steve or Jane or whoever your school, whoever your students are. And I'm going to change the name to author B. And you're going to see it goes back in, changes, the heat map changes because it's already set up, but it goes back into our sample database and it's separating the kids into their own personal sheets. So this has made a world of difference for me. It's allowed me to make better learning outcomes for my kids because I'm now using data to have discussions with administrators and parents and guidance counselors and the kids themselves with other teachers. This is really cool to pass along to the teacher who has your kid the year after. But I would love to see people start using something like this instead of spending thousands of dollars in student information systems, using a Google form, Google Sheets, and the student tracker code. You can create your own database. And again, the longer you use the rubric, right, the more you use it over the course of a year to assess a kid's growth, the more valuable this becomes. So it's made a huge difference for me, and I hope it really is something that you guys will be excited to use. If you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter at TechTupTeacher. Go to TechTupTeacher.com. Send me an email, chrisavilas@TechTupTeacher.com. I'm happy to help. Otherwise, good luck and have fun, and let's use some data to make our students and our teaching better.